Welcome, everybody. Happy holidays and Merry Christmas and Happy Hanukkah and everything. And I'll call this meeting to order. And then we will go around and do introductions as we always do. And everyone in the room will introduce themselves, our guests or whomever. So I'll start with Sarissa.
Sarissa Saraki, Senior Management Coordinator.
Eric Nelson, City Attorney.
Darren Nelson, Finance Director. Mike Funk, City Manager.
Kimberly Wilburn, City Council at Large.
Paula Romele, Ward 3.
Rebecca Shack, Ward 2.
Brad Grierson, Mayor.
Betsy Foster Bolton, Ward 1.
Debbie Calvert, at large.
Rachel Cisnochick, with Goff Public.
Ellen Larson with Goff Public.
Kelly O'Day, Recreation Director.
Kevin Fox, Fire Chief.
Will Manchester, Public Works Director.
Andrew Wittenberg, Communications Manager.
Julie Wishak, Community Development Director.
Derek Metzger, Deputy Fire Chief.
Sarah Westy, Assistant Recreation Director.
Dina Minion, Resident.
Jerry Rudick, Resident.
Vladimir Ilitsky, Resident.
Tom Stockert, Resident.
Kevin Ringhofer, Citizen.
All right, everyone, well, welcome. We've got, this is a special study session that was originally scheduled to be a regular meeting. And oftentimes, after we get our budget passed, we can cancel this meeting, but there are enough things on the docket that Mr. Funk and I and staff talked it over and decided that getting together for one last time would be the right thing to do. So with that, we've done introductions. Our first business item is long-term asset planning, which is something we've talked about before and is a major issue. So with that, I'll turn it over to Mike.
Thank you, Brad and council and staff and guests. Good evening. Again, just wish everyone a happy holidays, Merry Christmas, and however you celebrate your holidays. So it's that time of season. So let's go ahead and just jump in. In talking to Brad, we thought this conversation should hopefully last about an hour and 15, maybe 20 minutes. And then we'll go into agenda item 2, and then hopefully around 7:30 we'll get into closed session. So with that, staff has about we haven't timed it out, but I'm going to estimate a 20 to 30 minute presentation. So we want to go as quickly as we can on our end, and then allow council at least 30 to 45 minutes for additional conversation. The discussion questions that we've teed up in the staff report, and I'll start off with the 2 questions we'll ask you at the end, and that is, after the presentation, does the council need any additional information? And then secondly, as we go through this conversation, does the city have interest in pursuing local sales tax as a potential revenue source of funding? To really kick off tonight's conversation, first we always point to our strategic plan. And in our strategic plan, under our strategic priority, infrastructure and asset management, as you know, as we've just talked to this recently, we do have a very specific desired outcome, which is to develop an annual capital improvement plan that supports the sustainable maintenance and replacement of assets. And so really tonight's conversation falls within that realm of really looking at our assets. And as you know, we have lots of assets ranging from water and sewer pipes underneath roadways to roadways themselves, our facilities, meaning our structures, our buildings, trails, parks. So we do have a lot of assets, and tonight's, again, focus is really looking at those long-term assets and planning around its replacement. Certainly, as we talk about tonight, its financial consideration goes without saying in terms of these are substantial investments. We know cities own expensive assets, and just like at our houses, at some point we need to look at replacing and improving those assets. We do try, as you know, council and staff, to leverage as many tax dollars as possible, and at the same time looking for outside funding sources, whether it be grants, partnerships with the private sector, along with other financing sources such as our fees and franchise fees and user fees. You'll hear tonight that local option sales tax, which we've talked a little bit about, but it's been a while, is another funding source outside of property taxes. And Mr. Nelson has a slide that illustrates property taxes versus sales taxes. As noted in the staff report, and again, I think I've already kind of covered this, tonight we're really wanting to have a conversation with you about how we prioritize these capital projects across different asset categories, looking at a general timeline and sequencing of this framework. And we've got a slide at the very end that gives you a sense of if things were to put into motion, what that looks like in terms of projects and project timelines. So we want to share that with you. We want to also identify and evaluate the funding sources, because we do have several to choose from, whether it's property taxes, sales taxes, other types of user fees that would look to support these investments. And then at the end, just certainly looking for a conversation and some next steps and thoughts from you on all of this. To really jump into it, and for tonight's purposes, looking at these major improvements. The first one is trails. As you know, Mayor and Council, we do have in our CIP a whole section dedicated to trails, and we have a trail improvement plan. These are on our website. If we do need to pull it up, we can certainly pull it up here this evening. But as you know, we have a trail plan. We're making our way through that trail plan. In fact, we've made some substantial improvements to our trail system in the last 5 years. But as you know, when you look at the build out of our entire system, that cost in today's value is $100 million. We do have a revenue source, and we'll talk a little bit more about this in some coming slides. Our revenue source on that is franchise fees, where we collect $2 million a year. And let me give the simple, really simple math on that is if you have $2 million a year coming in, we're looking at a 50-year build out of our system. And we've had previous study sessions to that regard. In terms of the MARS, as you know, that was part of a facility study that occurred here about a year and a half ago. There's been conversations at the council and previous study sessions. I think 3 other times in the last year and a half where council, you've seen this. As a recap, we did attach that document in your packet. What's noted on the slide are 3 options. One, and I'll start with the bottom one, number C. 2C is $15 million. That's that deferred maintenance option, which is slightly, in totality, a little less than $10 million. But all of these include the 6.275 repayment for that interfund load, which was part of the initial purchase, and then the $2 million that we had for operational costs. So in total, $15 million for that deferred maintenance. 1B, I'll just move upward. 1B is $32 million, which includes the deferred maintenance plus some other items as noted in that staff report or in that report. And then 1A includes really this facility additions, which would be on the west side of the facility, so adding on to the building for enhanced opportunities. The next is then fire stations. Again, this goes back to probably the latest conversation we had earlier this year. 4 stations at roughly $12.5 million each. That's a new building cost, estimated cost. So 4 stations at $12.5 million or $50 million for our 4 satellite fire stations. We've had Opus on our radar screen. In fact, we got state bonding dollars a few years ago in the amount of $725,000 for purchase of land and also planning. And as you heard from recently Matt Kumka, we're in 2025, we're looking at doing an engagement process to identify those potential costs. As of right now, we say 30 million, but again, that's not identified. It could, there's a range in there. I think a really safe number to use at this point for discussion purposes is 30 million. We've also then talked about the community center remodel. As you know, we took bids on that almost 2 years ago now. and we paused that. So we have a community center estimated cost of $4 million. And then with the Williston Center, there's a whole host of options. Maybe the simplest way to say it, there's kind of an a la carte type of approach to the community center, ranging from $250,000 upwards of $26 million for improvements. So in total, excluding the trails, so take out the $100 million for trails, items 2 through 6, on the low end, just shy of $100 million, upwards of $151 million, depending on the options and where we land on those discussions. In terms of, and this is, I call this a proposed strategy, and this is I say it's a foundational work and a foundational conversation on what are ways that we could fund this activity, what is some potential packaging of projects in different ways of looking to get there. I'll call this kind of above the line. You'll see in the middle there OPUS, and I'll come to that here in a second. So above the line. In terms of that strategy, that would look to utilize local option sales tax. And before I go through 1, 2, and 3, I'll turn your attention over to the right-hand side of that slide, just to keep in the back of your mind about local option sales tax. In terms of the estimated revenues annually, we're looking at, it would be around $6 million. There was as you know, a sales tax study that was done by the University of Minnesota that's included in your packet. We've asked them to update those numbers. We don't have those yet, but they are looking to update those numbers. Short of getting those numbers, we're estimating at staff that would be approximately $6 million a year that could be collected in a half-cent sales tax. As you do the kind of reverse math on that, in terms of collecting $6 million a year, I'll talk about $5 million in a second, but think of $5 million of that $6 million would equate to roughly $75 million in projects. So the concept would be collecting sales tax, and that's how cities use this money. They collect that sales tax and then use those dollars to pay for principal and interest payments on debt. And so we could issue debt as a city around $75 million. Again, it depends on the length of the debt. This estimates I think it's 25 years, Darren, with a conservative interest rate of around 3.5%. So you could issue debt over 20 years, you can go issue debt over 30 years, and it kind of depends on some of those factors. But just keep in mind about $75 million in projects. The other thing, and our team over here at Goff Public, so Rachel and Ellen will talk a little more in depth here in a few minutes about sales tax and the landscape of sales tax. But know that as you consider, or as you think about sales tax, one of the statutory requirements is there's a maximum of 5 projects. So when cities have asked for sales tax, you can only note or can only ask for 5 projects. One thing that we've clarified, for example, is we've talked about 4 fire stations. You cannot ask for funding for 4 fire stations because that would be 4 projects. And so, again, keeping in mind that you have the ability to ask for up to 5 potential projects on a ballot. And then there's ballot strategy. We're not going to go too deep into ballot strategy tonight, but just understand that how we frame this up, again, if you're depending on how that's framed up, we'll want to take that into consideration in terms of the ask and how much could be potentially asked, etc. So with that kind of as the backdrop, just going through trails, or going through then 1, 2, and 3 noted here. As it relates to trails, as I noted here a few minutes ago, the city currently receives about $2 million in franchise fees from that funding source. As you know, that's been difficult to keep up with our trail projects, and when we look at our CIP, next 5 CIP plan, next year 5-year CIP, sorry, that we've got projects, I think 2 projects in the next 5 years, just due to current obligations, due to balancing the again, $2 million coming in. As you know, that's not stretching as far as we probably want it to go. So the thought process would be here is that with trails, of that $6 million in sales tax that could be collected, really earmarking $1 million of that for trails. And that way, that would supplement the $2 million that's currently coming in. So then in total, the city would have $3 million in trails that would accelerate that trail plan and I think propel a number of projects that many of our residents continue to ask for. Will is here, and so later on, if there's any questions about the trails or if you want to pull up the trail plan, we have the ability to do that. So that's the thought process around trails, again, using $1 million of that $6 million in sales tax. That remaining then 5 million could be utilized then for items 2 and 3. Again, the marsh, as noted, anywhere from 15 to 41 million in projects. And so I think part of tonight's conversation is, again, where does the marsh fit into perhaps a potential sales tax? And then what's the scope of that type of project? And then in terms of the fire stations, in talking with Chief Fox, while we do have 4 stations estimated at 12.5 million each, with this strategy is that we would look to improve 2 stations, Station 2 and Station 5. They're the ones in most need. That would be 25 million. Again, 2 stations at 12.5 million each. And then the other 2 stations, we would look to do some remodeling, what we call in the short term. So I would say in the next 2 to 5 years, we'd look to do some remodeling in the short term with a potential rebuild of those stations in the future. And we'll talk a little bit later on some of those timelines and how that could fit into with debt coming off at some point, because back in 2020 when the city remodeled the current police department, built the new fire station, that was a $30 million debt issuance. So we have debt sitting out there. And so the idea is that when that debt falls off, that could be replaced with these 2 fire stations in the long term.
And Mike, just for our guests and for people who are not as familiar as staff, is just identify the locations of the station, each of the stations, because I don't think the council thinks in terms of station 1, 2, or 3. It's station by whatever and so forth. So if you could just identify that for us, I think that would be helpful.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I'll quickly turn it over to Chief Fox. He'll have the road addresses at his fingertips quicker than me. So if Kevin could do that quickly.
Thanks. Good evening, Council and Mayor. So our 5 fire stations that we have total in the city, we have 4 satellite stations and our central station. So our central station, as everyone knows, is located here on the city campus. We have our Station 2, which is located on the northeastern part of the city at Hopkins Crossroad and essentially 394. And then our Station 3 is in the southeast quadrant of the city off of Roland Road, just east of Baker Road, and that's the station that kind of services the Opus area. And then our Station 4 is located in the southwest corner of the city on Excelsior Boulevard, right next to Purgatory Park. And our Station 5 is in the northwest quadrant of the city, located at Carlson Parkway and 394.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. So I'll call it, again, the above the line is to really look at trails, the marsh, and 2 fire stations of a potential ask for sales tax. The other thing with sales tax, you'll hear again this from Rachel and Ellen, is there needs to be regional significance. And so we will have to demonstrate regional significance when a city or county or jurisdiction asks for sales tax. In talking with staff and talking with, with legal counsel's been involved in our meetings and other team members, where the marsh fits into it is thinking about the marsh. The marsh has, Kelly, correct me if I'm wrong, with our membership spans over 90 cities in the metro. I say metro, but generally the metro area. So our membership expands well beyond just Minnetonka residents. And so there's a regional significance with the marsh. And then certainly with our fire stations, for Brad and Rebecca, who's met with us, and our legislators, that's part of our bond request too, is the regional significance and the amount of calls that certainly out of Station 2 in serving the Ridgedale area and our interstate system in and around Ridgedale easily can demonstrate regional significance on that front. So that's the thought process about 1, 2, and 3. I'm going to jump down to the bottom, Community Center and Williston. So Community Center, again, estimated at $4 million. Williston, estimated at $6 million. So the math on that is $10 million. Council, as you know, we as a city have recently positioned ourselves for a future $10 million bond issuance. And so that certainly is an opportunity to look at that as those 2 projects that would fit nicely into that $10 million bond issuance, just given their related costs. And then going back to Opus, and I apologize on the formatting, it's correct on my screen, but anyways, the form in the middle there then is Opus. It's estimated at $30 million. There's a number of options there, and it's not one or the other. It could be a combination of all these. in terms of utilizing sales tax. Perhaps we slide Opus into the sales tax conversation, going back and asking for state bonding dollars, a local bond issuance, and then park dedication fees. And so there's a number of funding sources that could certainly apply towards Opus. It's really unknown now until we get through 2025 and understand the full potential of what that looks like. Any questions there? It's going to pause there because this is, I think we'll probably go back to this a few times.
Anyone? Go
Yeah,
ahead.
I'm sorry.
Patsy.
So the 5 projects, just to be clear, the stations, the trails, the marsh, the community center, and,
It's 2 stations, and each station is a project.
okay, that's what I mean. So then, just tell me the 5.
So we can ask for no more than 5.
Right.
With the
And
ones
then-
above, I call above the line, the trails would be 1, marsh
Right.
would be 2, and then 2 fire stations. And so that's 4.
Okay. and
So you
then-
don't have to ask for 5.
Okay, we're not asking for 5.
Well,
We're just considering Opus.
Right now,
Sorry,
this is a
I'm not
baseline
following.
discussion.
Okay.
That's something you as a council will need to decide, is what, if you wanted to do sales tax,
Okay.
what would be the ask? It could be 1 project. If you see it being 1 project, it could be 2, it could be 3. We're noting 4 here as a potential pathway, but it could be as many as 5.
Thank you.
Yeah, the law just limits us to 5.
Right. Okay.
Good question. That answer your question, Patsy?
Thank you.
At this point, I'm going to hand it over to Darren. I think the next slide, Darren's going to highlight a little bit of the U of M extension report.
Yep, absolutely. Thank you, Mike. Good evening, Mayor, council members. We had a U of M Extension office did a sales tax report for us, and they've been doing it for a number of different jurisdictions throughout the last several years. But we had a report that was issued back in August of 2023. It was attached in the packet today on that end of it. The first report that we had them do was actually it utilized data from 2020, from the sales tax data from the state, dating back to 2020, which was obviously your COVID year on that end of it. 2021, you're kind of still in COVID timeframes as well too. And so sales tax data from the state is always back a couple years, so it's not real current on that end of it. And so, as Mike mentioned, we are in contract with the U of M to update that data now that it's a couple years old, hoping to get 2023, 2024 sales tax data on that end of it and such like that. So, but just kind of going through that report a little bit, just looking at the trends that they saw, the history of what Minnetonka sales tax generates. The history on that is that it's about 54% of the sales tax generated in the city is from non-residents, so people that are living outside the Minnetonka city proper limits on that end of it, and so that leaves us about 46% of residential sales tax on that end of it. And based off of that 2021 number at a 0.5% local sales tax, which is what we're looking at this point in time, that would have impacted each resident about $41.11 per year on that end of it. So that's, if you have 3 people living in a household, it's $41.11 times 3. Or if it's 1, it's just that 1 person times $41. So they kind of compare that to the sales tax to property tax as well too. And we can kind of jump back to that, but there is some effects of local sales tax as well too. So we have some surrounding cities that don't have sales tax, and so what does that impact to the purchaser, to the consumer when they're going to purchase goods and services that are applicable to sales tax? And kind of from what they've seen is that there really isn't an impact, or there really isn't a direct correlation between the consumer deciding to not purchase goods in a city that has an additional sales tax compared to a city that doesn't. Some of their data that they reference though is outstate, so they're kind of regional significance as well too, which maybe plays into the factor a little bit more on that end of it. Whereas in the metro area, you are able to travel to a different city a lot quicker than you are in the outstate area, greater Minnesota, on that area as well too. So, but historically, they have seen that there really isn't a big impact on that consumer making a choice based off a local sales tax piece of that. And then they kind of talk a little bit about property taxes and sales tax, and they really relate property taxes to not being impacted by your income. So the people that are on a fixed income, or a limited income, property taxes don't take that into account. Property taxes are based off the value of the property. And it doesn't take into consideration the income piece of that by the household. Whereas the sales tax piece of it, you always kind of think of it as a regressive tax on that end of it, and it is. But there are certain items that are exempt from sales tax in Minnesota. So you got your basic necessities of food and clothing that are exempt from sales tax, which kind of aids in providing a tax-free purchase on those items as well. So what they've seen is that our contributions that residents would make in the form of a tax. So is that tax that they would pay with a sales tax is actually less than what they would pay for with a property tax. And so I got a chart here on the next, or a couple scenarios here on this next slide, a little bit comparing the property tax and sales tax on, looking back, I went to the wrong slide. Okay, sorry. Comparing the property tax to the sales tax, in 2021, we were able to generate $5 million in sales tax. And so we'll kind of back that into a principal and interest payment based off of project-wise. We had about $75 or $80 million in bond size there, which would be a $5 million principal and interest payment. That has a pretty big impact to the property taxes this year. So if we're looking at our property taxes this year on the budget that we just passed, it would have increased the levy from our 7.9%, would have added 9% to that levy increase. So we'd have been at close to an 18% levy increase. And granted, you don't have to do that all in 1 year. You could have split that levy increase over 2 years potentially for a bond issuance to that nature. So it would have been, maybe 4.5 and 4.5 or something of that nature. But you would have had to increase taxes 9% to pay for that $5 million in revenue coming into the city. And you'd have to do that obviously for the term or the life of that bond on that end of it. Comparing that to the sales tax, so if we go back to the 2021 data that's in there, and that was $41 per resident. And if you looked at the per capita number of households in the city, so that's 2.27 based off of the 2023 U.S. Census Bureau, and you multiply that by that $41, you get to about $93. So you get about half. Kind of in that ratio that we were talking about before was 54, 46%. It's kind of a 50-50 type of difference there between resident and non-resident. That's kind of where this kind of plays out on that end of it. Just on the rough math, this is very high level, just kind of putting some things together on that end of it. But you can kind of see the sales tax impact seems to have a little bit less of an impact per resident or per household member on that end of it.
So I think I just pause there real quickly, and really what we're trying, I think as Darren's mentioning, really just trying to show the differences between how you might fund for these projects. And so we know sales tax not going to be popular with everyone. That's a given. And for cities that have approved it, we've seen anywhere from obviously 51% up to a 70% approval rate in these sales taxes. They're not unanimous, so there will be folks opposed to a sales tax. But we want to be able to point out to you that if you're not interested in a sales tax, which is fine, just making sure you understand then the implications that has for property taxpayers. So to put those capital costs on the property tax, that you as a council, we'd have to be looking at structuring debt payments, but eventually looking to raise a levy 9% for $75 million worth of improvements. And conversely, the sales tax has less of an impact. That's not on the property taxes, but it's paid for residents when they go shopping.
I have a question. So there was mention that these projects must have regional impact or regional significance. So, Marsh makes sense. I know that we have people from many cities that belong to the Marsh. Trails, probably same thing, because people from all over the place use our trails. Fire stations, I know that we have cooperative agreements with other communities, but is it regional enough to pass muster at the legislature?
Yes, I'll start off and then certainly look to Rachel and Kevin to chime in. So when we look at Fire Station 2 in particular, Deb, that's servicing that Ridgedale area. And so for the Ridgedale area, we have over 1 million people that go to Ridgedale on a monthly basis. We can look to the commuter traffic on the interstates where we have close to 50,000 vehicles that are traveling on our interstates. And that, you look at the call volumes that during the day, Station 2, that station is the busiest just due to the activity in and around that area. Then at night, that shifts to other stations and other service areas, just because people are leaving the city, the mall's closing down, workers are going home, and then call volumes shift to other parts of the community. So yes, I think we've got a very good argument in terms of looking at the regional significance of our fire stations. Feel free to jump in and add to
Yeah, I
that.
guess the only other thing that I would add is, in the current process, thank you, Ellen. In the process that's outlined in state statute right now and the requirements for meeting kind of this regional significance threshold, it's not clearly defined, and so it is a little bit subjective. So I think when we have stats and data that we can point legislators to and make a case for regional significance, then that, there's a little bit of room for interpretation there. And so that's part of what our team does at the Capitol, is help make that case to legislators.
And I would add that the statistics bear that out. If according to the U of M study, 54% of the money is going to come from non-residents of Minnetonka, that certainly speaks to the regional strength of Ridgedale, and that is the fire station that services Ridgedale. So I think that all ties together and makes for a pretty strong case on that point. Anyone else?
No, I just wanted to ask, I'm assuming that the calculations were based on kind of our current residential versus office kind of split, so that if something should happen and that percentages should change and we should have less, if more burden goes to the property taxes, then does that make any difference in terms of trying to raise that 5 million or not?
Not necessarily, other than the shift of between commercial and residential. You're still
Right.
requesting $5 million of
Okay.
property taxes. It's just, how is that split across your tax base at this point? So,
Okay,
but
thanks.
yeah.
Anything else?
All right.
All right, and then just a reminder about our community survey. So we did ask in both our community survey and our business survey about sales tax last year, or earlier, not last year, earlier this year actually. And this was from our community survey, and it was asked about, would you support for each of these projects a local sales tax or a property tax increase for that purpose? And so there's different numbers across here. I can kind of run through them real quick, but the first one is the upgrades to city fire stations, where you can see there the split was pretty much equal. It was 37% was supported the sales tax and 40% supported a property tax piece of that, with 20% neither, I guess, on that end of it, I guess. And so that's a little bit telling there as well too, of like, it feels like a public safety support is more there for a property tax versus a sales tax, but can go different as well. So the next one is adding parks and park amenities to the Opus area. Here you can see sales tax was at 55% and property taxes at 20%. So there's kind of a clear line there that said sales tax was more popular for that amenity than the property taxes. Line 35 was renovations to Minnetonka Community Center, which was 42% to 27%. And then renovations to Wilson Center was 47% sales tax and 19% property taxes. There again, pretty definite on the split there. And neither was pretty consistent across that 20 to 30% range on that end of it. And looking at the Marsh, it was very similar to the Wilson Center there as well, too, at 44% to 22%. And then City Trails was supportive again at 50% to 25%. And that was before they asked them or let the participant know that part of the sales tax comes from outside of city residents as well too. So the next follow-up question was, would they make more likely to support the sales tax increase, or somewhat likely, given the information that 54% of it was coming from outside the city, and 24% and 43% were much more likely and somewhat more likely to support a sales tax at that point in time. And that was from the community survey. Then in the business survey, we simplified it a little bit there and just asked them if they would support or oppose a local sales tax. And there you can see the strongly support and support was about 62% of the resident, or not residents, but businesses that were surveyed there. And opposed was actually quite a bit less than that, was at 16%. And Julie can maybe speak to, or Ms. Wishnak can speak to that as well too, if there's any questions on that. But from a business standpoint, it kind of makes sense as well too. Property tax is an expense, whereas the sales tax is a pass-through to them on that end of it. So I think that is all I have.
That is it. If it's all right, Mayor and Council will turn it over to Golf Public. And if Rachel, you can kick things off?
Yes,
Okay.
yeah, I'll
Welcome.
get it started. Awesome, thank you so much. Happy to be here. I know that I think Alan and I have had a chance to meet some of you at the Capitol before. But great to be here with you tonight. You can go ahead to the, I don't know who's controlling the
I got
slides.
control, just tell me
Okay,
next, then
yes,
we can-
perfect. So before we start diving in, we did just want to point out we have other colleagues on our public affairs team. So John Paul Yates, Elizabeth Emerson George, and Caroline Burns are also members of the Goff public affairs team. And so even if they're not maybe as visible to you all, they're still very helpful to Ellen and I behind the scenes and contributing a lot for the city. You could go ahead. So we just have a couple quick slides just on probably for you all just like some reminders of kind of overall legislative dynamics to be aware of as we head into the 2026 legislative session. We do have a new House Democratic leader in Zach Stevenson, but otherwise, Governor and Lieutenant Governor are the same for this next year. Our Speaker of the House, Lisa Namath, is the same, and then our Senate Majority and Minority Leader, Aaron Murphy for the DFL in the majority, and Mark Johnson in the minority for Republicans. So a lot of the kind of key players are still the same. Yeah.
There are also two House special elections coming up. They're both presumed to be safe DFL seats, so that's what this would show. It's expected to hold at 67-67.
Yep. And we can go, I think we've just got, and then we can go, sorry, I already did this slide. And then just a reminder again too about kind of the general timeline. So it's not a budget year this year, so we have a little bit of a later start. In 2025, session started in January. For 2026, we won't start until February. So we've got a little bit more time to kind of ramp up and make plans and get things going. Session will adjourn in mid to end of May as usual. And so just again, kind of a reminder of what all we have to look forward to in the next 6 months or so. And so from here, unless folks have any questions just about kind of high level things, I think we have just maybe one more slide on kind of overall legislative trends so we can keep going. We do expect, as I mentioned, it's not a budget year. And so traditionally in a non-budget year, the focus is really going to be on policy changes that don't have any major cost affiliated with them, as well as a bonding bill. I will say, the sort of trend of passing a bonding bill in an even year has not been the case in recent years. It's, any year you can pass a bonding bill is a bonding year, but there will certainly be a lot of focus and conversation about bonding in 2026. As you all might know, if you paid attention, they just released an updated economic forecast for the state just a few weeks ago. And the state is still sitting on a surplus for the current biennium, but we are still projecting a deficit as we look out to fiscal year 2028 and 2029. So we expect there to be, some conversation about possibly a supplemental budget. Maybe folks will want to spend some of the kind of immediate surplus that's available, but definitely there's going to be interest in cutting kind of some of that long-term spending to address that deficit, which is, again, kind of a conversation that played out during 2025 as well. 2026 is an election year. As you all might know, we've got midterm elections coming up. And so in 2026, we do expect just the kind of the energy and dynamics around that, especially with House Speaker Lisa Namath running for governor against Governor Walz, and just the primaries that are happening, all of that stuff just takes up a lot of energy. You have legislators really using kind of their time and space in that public arena to make their political cases and try to set things up for the election. And so that'll take up a lot of time. And then again, as with 2025, you have a tied House and a very narrowly divided Senate. You just have a one-seat Senate DFL majority. And so really to get anything done, there does have to be some amount of bipartisanship, which seems increasingly difficult these days. And so that also just kind of complicates the dynamics. All right, and Ellen's going to talk a little bit about specifically the tax committee because that's where the conversation around special authorizing legislation, if the city does choose to pursue local sales tax, a local sales tax proposal, that will all happen in the taxes committees.
Yeah. So these are the leaders in the tax committee. So in the House, they're doing a split co-chair model. So it's like a DFL co-chair and a Republican co-chair, and they kind of switch off committee days. One person sets the agenda one meeting, the next time it's the next co-chair who sets the agenda. So that's for the DFL, Aisha Gomez from Minneapolis and Greg Davids from Preston in southeastern Minnesota. And then in the Senate, Senator Ann Rest is the tax chair. It's her, she's announced it's gonna be her last term. And she is a really long tenured member of the legislature with a lot of experience in taxes. And then Bill Weber is the minority lead on that from southeastern Minnesota. So kind of just the general dynamic of the tax committee, it can be pretty difficult to pass a tax bill in non-budget years. Honestly, the reason we get a tax bill in budget years is because it has to go through as part of the deal, or there probably wouldn't always be one as well. It's been several years since there was a non-budget tax bill that wasn't vetoed. I think it was 2014 maybe. So that's not a great outlook. But there will likely be debate around federal conformity. The full federal conformity with the bill passed in the summer would be prohibitively expensive, but there will likely be some debate about partial conformity, which would be then like a bill moving out of the tax committee. The dynamics between the committees is pretty interesting. It's much more of a fight between the two DFL chairs, Aisha Gomez and Ann Rest, than it is between the Republican and DFL co-chairs. In the House, Aisha Gomez and Greg Davids have actually a pretty good working relationship, and we saw in the working groups into special session in June that they were more united than Gomez and Rest were as the two DFLers. So that could create some interesting increased tension between the House and Senate, which already happens a lot. Like I said, Chair Rest will be retiring. She has said that she's really interested in moving sales tax reform as part of her last year. Oh, yes, perfect. So part of the impetus behind sales tax reform is a moratorium that was passed in 2023. So they authorized some new ones, made some exceptions, and then passed a 2-year moratorium so they could do a study group and really figure out what they want to do with local sales tax. Legislators agree that they don't like how it's working right now, but they didn't really know what they wanted to do with it. So they went to, study group, which is the legislature's favorite thing to do. So this group produced a final report after a year. There wasn't really much that happened, but Chair Gomez and Chair Rest each put together their own kind of packages on sales tax reform. And there was actually a lot of overlap in these. So Chair Rest would like to pass one of these large reform bills as kind of the movement on sales tax this year. And Rachel is going to talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, and I'll just say what we mean by reform legislation is establishing a process and statute that does not require individual cities to go to the legislature for approval. This microphone, sorry. And so she has, Chair Rest has said that she is very interested in getting something done, and that is a top priority for her as she kind of finishes out her tenure at the legislature. We do expect that there will be some amount of tension between kind of the pursuit of this broader authorizing legislation and individual cities who want to pursue their own special authorizing legislation. We know that there are, a couple dozen other cities from what we've heard who plan to bring their own bills forward. And so there's very much still like a path forward for Minnetonka to do the same, but that will also be happening at the same time as this conversation around broader legislation. And we'll get to just some of the things for you all to be aware of kind of how that might complicate what you all may pursue yourselves. We do on the next slide. So we've got 2 slides just at a very high level overviewing the current process. I don't know that I need to like go through every step of this with you all, and I'll say I did very closely adapt this. The League of Minnesota Cities has a really excellent resource outlining the process. So basically what's on these next 2 slides, just with a little bit more detail. This is more just for your awareness and to refer back to perhaps for our discussion later tonight, or just as you all as the city continues to consider whether or not this is something you want to pursue. But really just the things that are most impactful for our work at the legislature is if this is something the city wants to pursue, you do have to adopt a resolution and then submit the resolution, the supporting materials. That's where we make the argument about regional significance and provide that data and information to the House and Senate tax committees by January 31st of 2026. Since that would be the session that we'd be pursuing something. And then step 3 is get legislative authorization. It's one little step. It makes it seem so easy, but again, that is where our team at Goff would be working at the Capitol and working in the tax committees to get that done. And then everything here, I'm probably not gonna go through, but just this is kind of what would happen after you get legislative approval, and just to know kind of what the additional steps look like. And so, yeah, so if we want to go to the next slide, Ellen, do you want to walk through just some of the, and just I'll introduce it a little bit. As Ellen said, both Chair Rest and Chair Gomez had introduced their own kind of broader authorizing legislation during the 2025 session. The bills were heard in the House and Senate committees, but that was kind of it. Nothing really happened. But we do want to just make you all aware of some of the kind of key differences between that current process that's laid out now and what Rest and Gomez have proposed. And I think we're especially interested in what Chair Rest has proposed. Not to say that it's not important to consider both, but she has made it very clear. She feels really strongly that kind of the way she has outlined things is what she wants to see cities do, and just given her tenure and the fact that it's her last session, we feel like we need to kind of put a little bit of extra weight on that. So I'll let Ellen kind of walk through some of these key differences.
So obviously the main difference is it would bypass legislative approval. Most of the reason for reform is that like every time there is not a tax bill, then all of these results just like there's a huge backlog. It's not the best use of the legislature's time to go through all of this. So both of these proposals would kind of use the Department of Revenue as to serve in a little bit of like what the role the legislature was doing. So they would require approval from the Department of Revenue the year before you put it on the ballot in a referendum, and you would submit materials to them. They both bypass legislative approval. Both bills would have some form of local sales tax equalization distribution, so distribution to communities in the surrounding area.
And those look a little bit different in both of their proposals, and it would also look different like in the metro versus non-metro. So for instance, I think what has come up before is Rochester has a different ability to generate revenue from a sales tax than the communities in much smaller towns surrounding Rochester. And so there's a feeling that there needs to be some amount of equalization. I think that would look very different in Minnetonka, and especially, there's there's exceptions if the surrounding cities of Minnetonka also have a local sales tax. Obviously you wouldn't need to share revenue with those other cities because they're generating their own tax, and you don't have that same kind of disparity between, I would say, like Minnetonka and the surrounding cities. So that's looks a little bit different.
Yeah. And then both proposals have, as part of it, regional significance. Chair Gomez's is much stricter, which I think kind of falls in line with how she doesn't really love local sales tax. It's just kind of her opinion on the matter. So it would require supporting documents from surrounding local governments to kind of prove the regional significance.
The other thing I want to note about that first bullet point, the requirement to submit materials to the Department of Revenue the year before. So in the current process, if Minnesota or Minnetonka gets legislative approval during the 2026 legislative session to move forward with their referendum, you could hold that vote in the 2026 November 2026 elections. You have to do it within 2 years, so you could also do it in 2027, but you would have the ability to do it much sooner. Whereas if there is not any special authorizing legislation passed and it's just kind of this broader process that's established, then the soonest that Minnetonka would be able to pursue this is in the 2027 elections. So it does affect the timeline depending on what happens at the legislature. And so that's something, again, that our team will be tracking very closely. And again, assuming that you all intend to pursue this, that's just, something we thought was important to make you all aware of. And I think that might be our last slide. Yeah, so again, if folks have questions, we'd be happy to answer them as best we can right now.
Any questions? Deb?
So many. So it sounds like under the current landscape, it would be difficult to get something, special legislation this year because of the intended changes to the process and the fact that it's not a budget year.
I would say, yes, there are definitely some challenges, but I think, if Minnetonka was the only city trying to pursue special authorizing legislation, that might be a different conversation. But if there are a couple other cities that are all bringing forward, the same type of proposal and are all saying it's important to us that we get this done now and are able to move forward on this, like that does carry some amount of weight. And I think that also, like when our comment earlier about, there's not often a tax bill, there's not often a tax like omnibus bill in a non-budget year, but there could be, there could be, a very small version of a bill that has just an omnibus that just has special authorizing legislation for cities. And so there are many different paths to get something across the finish line. And so you never know, right? Like we definitely won't get it if we don't ask for it, and asking for it, even if it is challenging, just given kind of some of these other dynamics outside of our control, doesn't mean that we can't still find a path to get something done.
So two other questions. One is, say we make our proposal, it doesn't go anywhere, what next? From your perspective on that ask, if it doesn't go anywhere this year, what's the best course forward after that? And I'll ask my other question after that.
Yeah, so I think it would depend on if kind of this broader authorizing legislation does pass, because then I think that is, again, even if it's not maybe the preferred timeline, that is still a pathway to getting something done. As Ellen mentioned, one of the reasons that legislators are interested in pursuing kind of this larger reform is because there are many years where cities do bring this special authorizing proposals forward, and there isn't a tax bill, or they don't get done for whatever reason, so they bring them back again and again. And so that would be another option. Like, this is something that the city could choose to pursue again during the 2027 session if needed. And so it depends a little bit on, what the other kind of context is and what else maybe does happen this year or not, and what the best strategy would be.
So that just made me think of another question. So let's say that the reforms happen, we start sort of sending materials to the Department of Revenue, not the legislature. Do they become arbiters then? Are they, do they have the power of denial? And so it's a whole other, it doesn't seem like we lobby the Department of Revenue.
Yeah.
Like, it just seems.
They would somewhat become like an arbiter, but instructions would be in the bill proposals, instructions for how they decide that are laid out exactly. So it's not really like a lobby situation. They would look at it somewhat impartially and just like, does this meet the requirements? Doesn't it? There's not really a like, I don't like this part of it.
It's not as subjective as having to go to legislators and get them to decide that you're meeting the regional significance and kind of meeting these other thresholds.
And would you anticipate difficulties, because if we go with, if Representative Gomez's version passes and we need to get signatures from neighboring cities who may also be, going to the trough, so to speak, is it going to be hard for us to get? I mean, is it going to be hard to get signatures from neighboring cities when we're both trying to ask for the?
Then it would behoove us.
That might be more a question for you all, for just depending on kind of what the dynamic is and the relationship with your neighboring cities. But I would say if
we're all
if
going for
They-
it,
they
you're
want
all
then we might as well
Yeah,
all
but I
sign each other's.
But I would say, I mean, how many cities touch Minnetonka? I think we have 8 neighboring cities. Not all 8 are going to be going for the same thing the same time, and we have collaborative relationships. So I think our relationships would work for us. And so I'm not. I mean, does that mean we'd have unanimous support? No, but I think we'd have good support among neighboring cities that matter. My amateur judgment.
No, I would just, I would concur. As mentioned by, I think, Rachel, because of the 2-year moratorium, there's a backlog. There's a backlog. We're hearing, I think as noted, over 20 cities having the same conversation. I'm talking with the city manager of Plymouth. Plymouth is having this very same conversation we are having tonight as well, because Plymouth is looking to go forward with their ask. One of their main legislators is Representative Cleaborn. She's been in contact with Representative Acom. So there's a growing sense of support from not just our 2 legislators, but in the legislative arena to do something. Because the moratorium's been lifted, I think I asked Rachel and Ellen, like, well, are they going to put another moratorium on? Well, could that be an outcome? And I don't think that's probably likely because they would have done that already. So I think they're looking to do something. And so the idea is that, yes, there's risks of going to the legislature to ask for this. They could say no, but I think we're going to be optimistic that there's going to be enough pressure there to do something, just due to the backlog.
Because you mentioned, a dozen cities?
it's over 20, I think, Mike. Yeah,
It's over 20 cities that are.
Yeah, okay.
And Wayzata has been also, I mean, then in terms of our neighbors, Plymouth is looking to do it. I think Wayzata has kicked the tires a little bit on that one as well. So that they may be having that conversation.
Medina, Excelsior, Roseville, St. Peter's. still
Excelsior
have it.
has a local option sales tax.
Already.
Chanhassen already has it.
Yeah.
Maple Grove.
I would just say about it, like, we don't want to promise you, like, action at the legislature that we don't know is going to happen. But if they wanted to extend the moratorium, it would have been very, very easy to this past session, and they would have done it. And it's pretty common to, like, introduce an idea in the first year of a session that doesn't, so this is like a no cost. It's a policy. So it's pretty common to introduce that in the first year and then actually work on it in the second year. So I think the signs are pointing to them doing something. We just don't, they're not really sharing their plans right now.
Yeah. And it's unclear if it could be like a both and situation. I think that might be ideal, right? As they allow these individual special authorizing bills to move forward in addition to kind of this broader reform. I don't know why it couldn't be a both and, but right, you're dealing with people. Legislators are people, and people are complicated, and so I think that's where, as we get closer to session, then obviously as session begins and we're able to kind of see how things are shaking out, we'll be able to just have a better sense of kind of what we're working towards, and then how we need to adapt our strategy and make sure that we're positioning the city as best as possible to get something good done.
Good.
And I know we're bumping up to 8 o'clock, and so last slide that we have, and I know there's probably a lot more questions and comments. Just looking at an estimated timeline, because I just want to also give you, the council, a sense of what does this all mean in terms of, we're having a conversation today, when could a project occur? And I just use the fire stations as an example, but I think this applies to even the marsh or anything else that might be on our list, and that is, and here we are, in, very left-hand side of that, our initial conversation here in December of 2025. And we look at when if we did a referendum, let's say things, we did the resolution, and we went to the voters this November, and the voters said yes in November of 26. That's the soonest anything could happen. And then you kind of play out when our first tax receipts would come, when you would look at doing a potential bond issuance, when you would actually hire an architect to do some work and do the bidding and actually get to the construction. I mean, really this plays out, you get to really the middle of 2029 before you see perhaps a project completed. That's the fastest that anything. That is the absolute fastest.
Fast lane scenario.
So again, I go back to my opening comments is, this is not, this is long-term planning. And so even in the sense of thinking, well, if we do a sales tax, something's not going to be built next year. It's going to be 3 years away before we actually get to a final completion. Now, my understanding is another kind of what if scenario in there is if the council's interested in sales tax, and again, goes to the legislature, they approve it. Now the city then has 2 years to put that on a ballot. So you could go to the legislature in this next legislative session. That gives you 2 years to put something on the ballot. You could, as I mentioned, do something November of 26. The latest you could do something is November of 27. Then obviously keeps pushing that out.
And then just a quick point too, and if, like was indicated, okay, it's a non-budget year, we get it out there, but the likelihood of something happening in that budget year is probably not particularly high, so then you go add another year. So basically, do you add this is the quickest, so would you add a year to this timeline if they said we introduced it in 2026, it doesn't really happen until 2027, so everything just moves back a year, so then we're at, 10, October of 30.
You're at, probably mid-year 30,
For a complete
30.
fire station.
Correct.
Okay.
Are the equalization costs factored into the estimates that we were given tonight? Do we know how much it would be?
We may not have them.
Yeah, that would only be if the city has to go through the process that's laid out in either Rest or Gomez's proposal. They're a little bit different from each other. We have shared kind of the full language and summary with Mike and Eric, and Naren, so, but I would say until that, the math on that is probably a little bit more complicated, and again, it's also unclear at this point, like how exactly those would even apply to the city, so that's something that we can look into more and get into.
Go back to that.
As things progress, that feels like it's kind of
Because doesn't Hopkins already have a sales tax? I believe they do.
Is Hopkins on that list?
We have a lot of folks around us who already have sales tax.
I have to look at that list. It's in our packet. I have to look at
Yep,
it.
I think we do.
there's
They do.
a list in the packet.
So Mayor and Council, that ends our formal part of just kind of laying a lot of stuff out to you in terms of this. So then it's kind of really circling back to then, we've got needs in this city. And again, I want to reemphasize, there's nothing you have to do as a council. We don't have to do any of these projects. And so I make sure I'm clear on that. But it's also our responsibility as staff to show you what are some of those big projects looming. And this is, again, an exercise of understanding what projects are out there. I think your funding options are pretty limited because there aren't dollars, there aren't going to be federal dollars that can help pay for these projects. There aren't going to be state dollars that are going to be available to pay for these projects. It does really come down to a philosophical discussion on where does the revenue come from? Does it come from property taxes or does it come from a sales tax? And I mean, really that kind of gets to the heart of the question. And it's about timing, in terms of how and when you want to kind of try to schedule these. How do we try to fit them in? Inflationary costs keep escalating. The price of these projects are not going to decrease, as we know. Going back to the Trails project, when I first started with the city in 2019, Will Manchester, that same trail list was, I think, 55 or 60 million, and it's now estimated over 100 million. So we know the costs keep escalating on all these projects. So with that, we're going to pause as staff, Brad and council, and we have some questions we teed up for you, but then anything you need from staff, we're here to chat with you on
All
that.
right, great. Yeah, Rebecca?
So I just have a couple, I guess a big question, but my understanding is, you know, there's, if we want to pursue this, and I think that we have to assume we're pursuing, if we were to pursue it in 2026, that we're pursuing it based on what the law is now and not based, you know, we can't go down the rabbit hole of what the what ifs are. It feels like, you know, that we have some work to do in the next 6 weeks to make that happen. But correct me if I'm wrong, that's just a first step, and we have a lot of off ramps as the, you know, as this moves forward. So we present it to the legislature, and then say they approve it. Theoretically, we wouldn't have to elect to put it on the ballot, so that would be an off ramp, right?
Correct.
And then obviously the voters deciding, that's a big part of this, big contingency. And then the council has to adopt the voters' decision. Is that even, and maybe this is a question for Eric, does that happen? The voters approve a sales tax and then the council's like, we're not gonna implement that?
I can also maybe defer to Goff, but typically when you have special legislation that's passed at the state level, it's a requirement for any type of special law that's passed for the city to adopt a resolution approving the special law, and then you transmit it to the state that you've adopted the law. So it's largely sort of a pro forma requirement.
Okay.
It's not necessarily imbued with
So
discretion.
that's not much of an offer.
Right.
But there are a couple opportunities. I guess I want to put my mind at ease is that we're not making the decision in January that we are going to have a sales tax. There's a lot of opportunity for us to change direction as we consider some of these things going forward. Is that right?
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned that, Rebecca, because that is correct. And so if the council were to look at doing this resolution, it is not committing the city to a sales tax. It's
Or
the
even to a referendum.
Or even to a referendum. It is the first step in this kind of lengthy process. And so there are opportunities beyond that to pivot, if you will. And so some of those other what-ifs would be if you did a resolution in January, the legislature could say no. That could just stall out this year in the legislature, and we'll be perhaps back at it in 2027. If the legislature does approve it, then you're correct. I think we would want to then as a city talk about next steps in terms of there's a whole marketing campaign that happens too. And Andrew Wittenberg's here, our communications manager, and he's been part of our team conversations in terms of how do you do community engagement? Because there's some real defined statutes on what a city can and can't do in terms of promoting and advocating for a sales tax. So we'd have Andrew really heavily involved in that. So there's marketing that happens. There's a decision on if you do want to put it on a referendum. Is it November of 26? Is it November of 27?
But
So,
said
yes, there's
another
other-
way, if we don't act now, we're kind of on the sidelines
Right.
for at least this year, if not, beyond that.
Correct. Taking action does allow the city that opportunity to have further conversation. Because yes, you would close the door till next legislative session.
Got it. Thank you.
Thanks, Rebecca. Other questions for council? I've got one. The discussion questions, does the city have interest? I mean, we're not making decisions tonight. But let's say the council, you're gonna be counting noses on this, and assuming you get more than 4, then what is the process? What's the next step? Because we're not gonna pass a resolution tonight. We have to do that in a regular council meeting and so forth. So just kind of, if you got 4 noses nodding in the right direction, what would be, and you're in a hurry, what's the next steps look like?
Yeah, thank you, Brad. Can you go to that proposed strategy? So it does come down to then priorities, because the resolution there's some specificity around the resolution. Now, the resolution isn't written in a way where it gets at the ballot questions, but you have to be very specific in terms of the project and the dollar amount. And so we'd want to bring, if you have some direction tonight on maybe some of these that maybe interest you, we'd want to know that as staff, because we'd want to come back to you in January with a further conversation on really pinpointing which of these projects you would have an interest in, including in a sales tax, and more importantly, how much. And so, for example, with the marsh, if there's an interest in including the marsh in a sales tax, you as a council need to identify how much. Is it 15 million? Is it 32 million? Is it 41 million? So yes, you're gonna have to be very specific in terms of that resolution.
With the specificity, that's tonight too?
That does not have to, no.
So, right, okay, got it.
Tonight is just a general conversation to gauge your interest, kind of lay out everything as we have, and kind of first understand if there's interest in pursuing a sales tax, then we would want to come back to you in January to flush out even further, like the things I just mentioned.
So I'll ask the question another way. I mean, we're not voting tonight, but, are there any council members who would not want to pursue this? Or do you think we want to keep our options open and keep moving forward?
I want to keep moving forward.
Yeah, me too.
Because I just think our options are limited, and I think as things progress over the next few years and federal funding and programs dry up, I think this will become one of the only funding options pretty much for anything we want to do in the city, so.
And anyone else want to add to that or anything? I've talked to Mike about this. He knows, I think you all know, I'm not a big fan of sales tax. I'm just not. But I also am a fan of having options. And this is going to be your decision next year, not mine. So I'm not going to state a strong opinion on this. I think that, and I think the data support a position contrary to my opinion. Because, this particular chart that we have that shows the cities that have sales taxes, and Golden. I was at Menards recently, and I looked at my receipt, and I thought, oh, that's almost 10%. And my arithmetic, was correct. Golden Valley's sales tax is 9.775%. People notice that. Now, we're not looking at a 1.25% sales tax. We're looking at a 0.5%. But given the way our sales tax is structured and, the LAHA money and the different things that have been passed, it's starting to add up to, be very noticeable. And so I'm very mindful of that. But I also agree with what Deb said. And, I'm a believer in, local control and having options. And so I think it's prudent, regardless of what I think of the sales tax personally.
Because it is regressive.
Well, it's a lot. It's a lot of things. It's just a lot of things. And my argument is this:
in some ways.
that as a council member, if I put it in the property taxes, my local voters can hold me accountable, and I feel that that's intellectually honest. And if they think I'm raising taxes too much, they can fire me.
Yep.
And I think that's appropriate. I'm willing to be accountable. I'm not comfortable saying, well, gee, we can get half this money from people who don't live here. Well, you know what? There is no free money. So that's why I don't love sales tax. But at the same time, I do know that cities need flexibility. So I would tend to agree with all of you that retaining the flexibility is important. And you get to make the decision next year. I can watch from the sidelines, regardless of what my opinion is. I think given the limited number of tools cities have for revenue generation at times when things are getting tighter, I think it's prudent for the city to move forward with this. Even though I think it's a tough decision, because I think our residents are starting to feel nickel and dimed, and I think the sales tax contributes to that. So those are my pros. I've argued both sides of the question now, which I often do. But I think I think it's prudent for us to move forward with this, whether I like it or not. So I think you've got enough noses, Mike.
I'm good.
Yep.
So can I ask a question about the strategy then? So if we said $1 million, if we said yes to number one, that's really $25 million, right? And that's a third of the pie.
Well, we just have to do the projects, right?
Well, we have to identify
Yeah.
what we want to.
It wouldn't be a third of it, it'd be less than that, because you're collecting $80 million of principal and interest over that 25 years, so you're gonna.
Right, but if this estimates that over the period of the term that there's $75 million in projects that it'll support.
Yes, but your payment, your collections.
You're not paying interest, you're
Yeah,
just
you-
taking.
right, you're just taking that $1 million and putting it
got
direct
it.
into project
Got it,
costs, something like
okay.
that. So it's $1 million out of $6 million of collections.
So, but you also want direction on the projects that we would support, and I'll tell you my priorities. I think that I would certainly support the 2 fire stations.
Yep, yeah.
And
I think
then I
everybody-
would go for the option C on the Marsh, the low-cost option, get the deferred maintenance done and get it up to snuff. And I have a vision for other ways of maybe funding some of those higher test options. So those are my preferences. And then, the $1 million for trails, I kind of view that as important as trails are in our community. I kind of view that as nice to have. And we have other avenues. I mean, we could, I know when we did the franchise fees, it was made very clear to us, well, it's a franchise fee, but it's really a tax. It's not like it's optional. It appears on our utility bill. We have to pay it. And oh, by the way, because it's not tax deductible on federal tax forms. It's a fee that you pay, but you get no tax benefit from it from either the state or the federal government. So, I'm kind of come see, come saw on the trail aspect of it. So those are my priorities.
I would say fire stations, I think we probably all agree that those are the number one priority. I'm of a different mind on the trails, particularly because of, I think it does promote a lot of alternative commutes, particularly to schools. We're hearing so much about traffic related to schools. And, if we talk about, some of the comments we've heard from folks about, say, Essex to, not that I'm partial to that segment, but to McGinty, and people telling us, well, my kid would bike to school if there was a trail there. I do think we would get it would help the congestion. So that, in my mind, is kind of the thing. And then I would like to see the Marsh. I would like to see us be able to do some of I think we could get closer to, we could definitely cash flow plus if we were able to do 1B. I just don't, adding the numbers up, I don't know if we can get there, but I think we would see some definite revenue benefit by doing that. But I could be sold on option 2 on the Marsh as well.
Yeah. Do you want answers for everyone on this? Or?
The more discussion you have, the more helpful it is for staff.
The more information you
Yeah,
get, the
I'm
happier
with
you'll be.
Rebecca.
'Cause
Pretty
I
much
would-
I prefer to see 1B or Marsh Plan B as well, but, because just one thing, just like, I agree with everything you said about trails, and I agree on the fire station and the primary. So if we had to prioritize, for me, it would probably fire station, Marsh, and then trails, just because the Marsh has become such a community hub right now. And, we see other cities around us. It's basically, if we had a community center, like a large community center, like Plymouth just did this big $80 million community center. It has all of the things that we have under one roof that we have between our current community center, City Hall, and fire station, and police station, and Williston, and the Marsh. And it's just that we have it split up into different buildings. But, other cities have this. And, I think it has become, I think, even more so than Williston or the community center, the central hub, and an identifier and really important place for the city and residents of all types. So for me, that would be a priority, and I would prefer to see 1B, the 32 million, if we could. But again, that would be my stronger preference. If we have to go down to the 15 million, I would be able to live with that, I guess. And I'm looking forward to when we cash flow and hoping that maybe we can look at some other ways to help that cash flow, perhaps through different fee structures for residents versus non-residents, if we don't get this. Because right now it is a regional destination now. I know lots of people from Orono, I know people from Mound and Nitrista, and all points west as well as Plymouth.
Minneapolis?
Who are coming in to use it.
No. Other comments?
Well, I would more agree with Rebecca and also the mayor, because I would go for trails as well. Obviously the fire stations first, but the trails, and for me, it's the schools for sure. I mean, that's a public safety issue to me. But also, if we're going to talk about, climate change and the sustainability and other ways to travel throughout the city, I would say trails is, and as a person who runs throughout this city, it can be lethal in some of these places. So I would,
As a person that got hit by a car.
Yeah, and I got hit by, and it was in Hopkins, but still,
That wouldn't have happened in Minnetonka.
But it was in
Yeah, I think it would have.
It's like,
But and I think that I would tend to go toward option C for the Marsh.
I just if I can add a little bit, we had a recent meeting. Mike and I had a meeting with the Hopkins School District, and it was our normal kind of quarterly meeting. And the conversation was that they increased the perimeter where they made it larger, so it reduced bus service.
Yeah.
So that
Right.
rather than picking up kids within a mile, or they now made it 2 miles, and that cut bus service. And they had to do that by a budget necessity. It was not an easy decision. It was controversial, and so I'm going to modify my comments a little bit on the trails, because if we can provide safe routes to school for kids and give them the opportunity to ride their bikes to school, I think that's positive for the environment, it's positive for the kids, and frankly, it's positive for school budgets that are under, we know about budget strain, and school budgets are under tremendous budget strain. So I'm gonna modify a little bit and say, you know what, doing more for the trails makes sense. And it's only, I don't want to say only $1 million, but that's the cheapest thing on the list. And we can add that and then do the other things in an appropriate order and make some progress. I think that probably makes a lot of sense. So I'm modifying my vote a little bit.
I agree with that. Environment being one of my top priorities, it just makes sense. And when you think about the fact that we've actually built, since we did the franchise fee for trails, we built many sections of trail, and instead of the amount getting smaller in the need, it is almost doubled in a smaller number of segments that we need. So, so I think for all the reasons that you just enumerated, I'm definitely for trails, but fire stations are number one for me. And I would say, as far as the Marsh, as much as the 41 million is tantalizing, and I actually feel like it would have a greater return on investment because we could get more rental income from what we're trying to accomplish there. I think a reach goal would be the option 1B, and if we had to, I mean, I think just dealing with the deferred maintenance, but I'd like to get a little past that and really make sure that we can capitalize on a you know, a really good facility that is already attracting and, you know, is almost breaking even in a very short time period, so.
So I'm looking at my watch, and I want to be mindful of time. So I want to make sure,
Kimberly.
I want to make sure that everyone who wants to get some licks in gets them in, but we want to keep moving.
Yeah. So basically what everyone else has said, fire stations, definitely trails also. For the marsh, I'm leaning towards 2B to see if we can't make 2B work. And just to I think there's still a place for like some of the alternative
Funding
marsh-
for-
funding
funding
for the marsh.
options, yeah.
Like I think
Absolutely.
Yeah.
we'll still
Yeah,
pursue
yeah.
that, and we
Yep,
could,
yep.
Yeah.
you know, maybe get 2A done with that.
Right. Well, yeah, and
So,
that's,
yeah.
that's the thing. I mean, I think that there are alternative paths to, I'm not saying I'm opposed to 1A or 1B, but I don't want to pay for it with bonding. I'd rather do item 2, the deferred maintenance, and that doesn't mean, okay, you're not going to see any of the improvements. The improvements will be evident. It's just that there's not going to be an expansion of the
Right.
marsh. And let's get the marsh looking as good as it can be with item 2, and then let's find more creative solutions for making significant improvements to the marsh. That's kind of my wish list. So, I don't know, Mike, do you have anyone
yeah.
else? I don't want to cut anybody off, but I do want to move along.
Let's move on.
Got what we
All
need.
right.
Thank you, Mayor.
Okay.
Then we'll bring this back to you in January. We'll keep filtering it down, and I'm hearing for the marsh, there's interest in both 1B and 2, and
Yeah.
we'll kind of lay both those options out and kind of highlight the differences between those, so
Yeah.
again, you're clear on what those are.
Yeah, I think that's good. And talk about what you get with the least cost option, because I don't want people to think that, okay, everything would be the same and you get a new boiler. I mean, I think, and some of the things that haven't worked as well there will work better. I mean, I think it's more than that, and I think it's updating it and making it, so, some clarity on what you're getting for each of those, I think would be helpful for the council to make a decision. So.
Great.
that
And we're gonna have
brings-
updated numbers, right?
Yeah.
On
Yes.
the estimates, that will
I
help.
think that's already updated.
Fingers crossed.
Oh, from the University of Minnesota?
Yeah.
Yeah, we're hoping to get those,
Early January, hopefully.
Okay,
yes.
all right,
Yep.
sorry, Mayor.
No, that's fine, that's all good. So we've covered this one, thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
That brings us to item B, the 2026 City Council Study Session Work Plan. We did some work to provide some direction to staff, so Sarissa, is this yours? Or is this or Mike?
Probably both of us. Well,
Okay.
yeah, thank you, Brad. Again, appreciate your conversation on this, Brad and council. Rachel, Allen, thank you for coming.
Thanks for coming, nice to see you.
Thank you.
Take care, Merry Christmas.
Thank you.
So thank you. While Sarissa's pulling that up, so real quickly, we thought we'd just show you on the overhead here what was in your packet, and that is a draft of the 2026 study session work plan. We want to make sure we captured everything correctly, and then just walk through this with you if we can, and then if you have some changes or suggested changes, please let us know so we can bring this to you on January 12th regular meeting for final approval. So a couple things in here, I'll just go really quickly. Again, I won't go month to month, but just to point out a couple things for you. So January 26th, that study session in January, maybe even January 12th and the 26th, we'll talk about the same conversation we had here tonight, because there's some more conversation we need to get buttoned up for by the end of January for that resolution. February, we'll have Will come and talk about Trail Street and major CIP project review. So we'll do that in February. Again, that's always the kickoff also for our community survey. So we'll have Peter Leatherman here and we'll go through that exercise. March, we'll call it kind of using a play on words from Julie. Julie used to say all things housing in July. Maybe March will be all things public policy. And so kind of group those together in terms of the council policies, talked about that. Substance regulations, I think Kimberly brought that up. And then short-term rentals VRBO. Now, we put this list together, and two things that I want to point out to you, and so Julie's here also. With the short-term rentals and the verbal conversation, I think, Paul, you brought that up. Julie had mentioned to me that that will get discussed during the zoning code rewrite. And so while we could have a conversation March 2nd, the zoning code rewrite, Julie, I think that's whoever got the mouse, if you want to scroll down for me. We have the zoning code rewrite in October. Julie, do you want to speak to more about what that looks like in terms of?
Sure. Yeah, there's actually 3 check-ins that we need with you about the zoning code next year. Okay, so March would be one zoning check-in.
That'll be at a regular meeting, Julie?
That,
Yep.
no, we could do that at March 2nd. That could just be a zoning update. Here's what we're doing, here's what's happening, that sort of thing. Tell you what's been happening at the meetings with the zoning workshop.
Oh, so we could, so maybe on March 2nd, Julie, could we put a zoning code update?
Right, instead of short-term rentals. And then on July 20th, we would do a very deep dive into the zoning code as well as housing. And in that, it would be drive-through short-term rentals at the same time. And then we would come back in October because you would have a final zoning code. I mean, there's a lot of zoning stuff to do next year. And so you would have one more zoning check-in before public engagement, or before the public has a chance to see it. So there's 3 kind of zoning touch points next year. And I'm sorry I wasn't here late last week when this was put together. Otherwise, I would have added it. Sorry, my fault.
No, well.
Can I just, I'll wait until it's time to comment.
Oh, yeah. Thank you,
Whenever you
Paula.
want us to comment.
So yeah, thank you, Julie. So what we could do, Julie, so Julie's suggesting on March 2nd, do a zoning rewrite check-in. Is it possible to touch on short-term rentals? I know it was talked about last Monday.
Yeah,
So Paul,
I guess my only concern is, it sounds like then that anything that we do would not go into effect until the zoning rewrite. Is that am I understanding that right? Because we had talked about it when we talked about it last year and decided to go forward. I think the mayor made a comment that the plan or the goal would be to have something in place before the summer season of this year. So is that, I mean, I didn't know if, I haven't heard what's gone on since then. So I guess that would be my one concern, or just wanting to understand what's going to happen with that then, if it would be part of that, be waiting then another basically year then to be part of the zoning code, or it would be something that's considered separately.
It's a heavy agenda. That's all I'm saying, Mike. I mean, so it depends on, we have to write substance regulations that same meeting. And so it depends on what's more important maybe to the council. Doing this outside of the zoning work is troublesome. I think when you have multiple conversations going about multiple areas of the zoning code, that is hard to manage. But I'm open to whatever you want to do as a group. So
We can circle back. We don't have to. We can get to the other things. I don't want to
Yeah, so
necessarily derail us right
Yeah,
now.
let's, if it's okay, we'll make an edit. We'll call it zoning code check-in on March 2nd, and let's just, we'll see where we are. Staff will, if there's something that we think we can do to try to move it along, we'll do that.
That'd be appreciated.
I'm trying to, I'm not going to be there, okay? So, I'm trying to not have a strong opinion on much of anything tonight. I'm not succeeding, but, this is really your all call. And I'll kind of leave it at that. I'm going to.
And I'll just say this, maybe let's just keep going through it, and then let's circle back at the end of all of it. The other thing I'll just quickly mention is that what I tried to do in working with staff on this is make these manageable in terms of a timeline. So as we start at 6 o'clock. The idea is to have a couple items hopefully kind of a 2-hour meeting, 2.5 tops. So trying to also not overbear
Balance.
staff in bringing stuff forward, but also our time here as well. So March would be kind of policy discussions. April, we'll have the pre-budget kickoff with director presentations, public safety master plan review, our first 30-minute open time. May then is the budget kickoff, where we'll, at that same time, discuss marsh operations, rec facilities, priority-based budgeting. That'll be a first kind of time with priority-based budgeting. And then Peter Leatherman will come back with community survey results. That's usually about maybe a half hour. So between those two items, big heavy lift on the budget, then community survey. June is where we used to have CIP, EIP. We split those up. So this year, June is CIP. And then also, that'll give us more time to really kind of dive in a little deeper with CIP. And Will, like we said, is coming in February, but that'll also give us a chance to highlight a few other things as well with the CIP. And then we had committed as council and staff to talk about Purgatory Park, so we'll do that check-in in June. And if you want to scroll, Sarissa, please. July is then all EIP, so instead of all things housing, all things EIP, which includes housing, review developer, refinance policy. As Julie just noted, we'll do a zoning code check-in. Drive-throughs, I think, will be part of that whole zoning code rewrite. Then in August, will be more general fund and levy focused. Also then a second discussion on priority-based budgeting as that continues to move along. We do not have a study session in September. Then October is all zoning code rewrite. That'll be probably a pretty in-depth conversation because as Julie just mentioned, that'll be the third time that's coming back. So we'll make sure we dedicate enough time to the zoning code rewrite. Then November, again, all budgets regarding general fund, enterprise fund, special revenue fund account. So really heavy in budget in November. And then December is kind of our staple conversation. Before you know it, 2026 will fly by. So those are the edits we made. I quickly went through that. I think we captured everything that the council talked about, tried to lay this out in a way that is manageable. Then just turn it back over to you for comments, questions, anything we missed in here. Again, I'd note there's 2 30-minute open times. This last year we had more than that. So if you want to do more 30-minute open times, just let us know where you want to put those. And with that, Mayor,
All right, Mike.
turn it back over to you.
Thanks. Any comments from council or any concerns you have or any questions you have?
Once again, just city manager review at the end of the year needs to fit in there somewhere.
Yes.
And do we want to do that in December or November? I don't know.
Well, I mean, December looks
We have the 21st, just
awfully.
like we're doing today.
No.
We have done it in the past at the end of a regular council meeting, but looking at that calendar.
And maybe we can do that, just because we've actually gone ahead and, updated the process, which was, what took time this year, but I
Yeah.
just, we have done it both ways, and so I just wanna make sure it's worked into the schedule at some point.
Yeah.
I'd rather not stay until midnight doing it, so if we can, I'd rather add a study session than stay until midnight again.
That's fine. See how it goes.
And nobody wants to stay till midnight.
No, but
right.
I think that, nobody does, but.
Well, I don't think the 16th or the 14th would be effective time-wise to do them. So then, we see the regular council meetings either on the 23rd of November or the 21st of December seem like, because the 7th is the budget approval, so that's not going to be it. So I think we just
Suck it up.
maybe
One of
plan ahead
those.
when we're planning those
Yeah.
agendas and see if we can't get it on the 23rd of November rather than,
We can do that.
maybe we could skip,
Yeah.
Yeah, and
I
if we
think that
can't, we
makes
have
good
the
sense.
21st.
All right.
Okay.
Anything else, council?
I just do
Yep.
have one. I just was wondering, I'll follow up with you on this on our next sit-down, is just that I think the rollout from purgatory signs and things has not been, kind of because of weather and other things. And so my only concern is maybe that we be open to seeing what, that June 15th, because I'm not sure we'll have enough time with full signage for Purgatory to be able to really evaluate. So that would be my only caveat, because we're really going to we didn't have signs out really this fall until very late, and we only have a few out. So it's not fully signed yet. So that would be one thing in addition to what I've already mentioned. Not that we have to change at this moment, but just something for awareness, I guess.
Yeah, that's a good point. Will, I'm sorry. Will, where are the signs up?
Yeah, so everything is up for the off-leash leashed areas. Citywide, there's a few that aren't up because of the weather, just for the ordinance, but everything else should be in at this point.
Okay, but that's just very.
But it just happened within the last 2 weeks.
Yeah, but I think that just happened. I mean, within the last week or two, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks, Will.
But didn't we sort of make a commitment to
I
come back
think we
in
did make a
June?
commitment, yeah.
Yeah.
What-
Okay,
so-
that's fine. I'm just saying that there's not a lot of time to have, like prime
Right.
season.
And
but-
we maybe in June, we may ask for more.
Right,
Mhm.
right.
Yeah,
Okay.
there's nothing that precludes you from extending it.
Sure.
We'll get to June, and if we
Yeah,
have to
to see
go
if we
later.
have enough data to
Yeah.
actually make it.
Right.
That was my only point,
Yeah.
not to change it necessarily, just to have it in mind. And then besides the, obviously the short-term rentals, I acknowledge that, that it would be more convenient to fold that in. I just, I know that there's several, including one next door to me, but that shouldn't be the driver of people who are specifically coming in and starting to buy in Minnetonka to use for short-term rentals. And for the few, and there's not a lot of people who live on lakeshore properties, but a lot of them are paying incredibly high taxes, property taxes, and not all of them are the uber or the wealthy. And, people are buying up those places and then doing short-term rentals, and you're having parties every single night next to you. I just went through that this summer personally, and I know it's happening elsewhere. So, if there's a way that can be done sooner than later, I would much prefer that than to see what happened in Wayzata, where they basically had a city kind of a very controversial thing that happened, process of people really kind of getting out their pitchforks a little bit and bringing that forward. So that would be my main concern, is that we, kind of address this sooner rather than later, so we don't have people who are maybe buying investment properties here in the next year for that purpose, and then having to come back and say no, and then we have, oh, well, it was grandfathered in, or, kind of all of that stuff. So I think, dealing with something like that sooner than later than waiting it, from my perspective, and I'm willing to listen and learn to why that isn't. So, but I'll leave that for now and just kind of put that in there as my preference.
Yeah, thank you, Paul. I would just quickly add, Brad, that I'll connect with our city attorney and Ms. Wishnack, because I understand the concern of having these kind of dual
Yep.
tracks happening.
Absolutely.
Is there, and this is where I want to ask our two partners here, teammates, on if there's a moratorium option. Can you do a moratorium while the zoning code rewrite plays out? Maybe that doesn't have to get answered here, or maybe.
I'll let Eric
Could
answer.
you do like, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Could do a moratorium in
Yep.
the interim?
Well, let me
So we'll-
just throw out a suggestion, and because I think these are relevant questions, and I'm uncomfortable for staff to say yes or no on anything right now. But
Yeah.
but how about if we agree that staff will look and see if there are any options that would make sense legally to allow us to kick the can down the road to avoid the problem. And that could be a moratorium, but let's have the experts look at it a little bit more
Absolutely.
thoroughly before we make a decision. We're not supposed to make decisions tonight anyway.
That's
If that,
fine.
if that,
Yep.
if
I'm
that
not
makes
asking
sense
for
for
a
everybody.
decision.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
All right.
Good.
Thank you.
So, and then the only thing I want to say on this, and I said I wasn't going to say much, when Mike and I met today, we talked about the the starting of the in April, the 2027 budget, director budget presentations. And talked about the pros and cons of that, because sometimes that can get to be a pretty long evening. And so I threw out the suggestion, and I'm one vote, not a lot, and I'm not going to be here next year, but if we could really make those budget direction presentations, the kickoff ones, really be an executive summary. Really, no more than 5 minutes each, and even there's 8 of them. That's eight at 5 minutes each is 40 minutes. So it's an easy way to eat up time. And if everybody can be disciplined, because I really like the idea of starting the budget conversation early. But if you're going to have a bunch of 3-hour budget sessions, I think that is counterproductive. So I shared that with Mike today. FYI, you guys get to decide.
But I have the same feedback, and I think we could probably cut out the conversation about 2025. I think in the past there's been the slide about what was accomplished last year, and just really talk about challenges and anticipated issues going forward. Not that the other information's not useful, but I think we do so much talking about it. I think we have a pretty good foundation.
Or maybe include the information, but we don't need to review it verbally.
Yeah, good point, Deb.
Yeah, just put it in
So
the packet.
if that's, yes, go ahead,
I just was
Kimberly.
gonna throw out there, like, looking at with budget presentations and then the public safety master plan review, I'm not sure there's gonna be time for a 30-minute open time.
Yeah, well, and I think staff could use some suggestions. If we should move that elsewhere, we can do that.
Yeah, and I don't know, like.
Where?
I don't know where. But I'm just not sure there is
Yeah,
gonna work.
and we've had times where we have been unsuccessful.
Yeah, we had that this
we
year where
had
we
it on the
didn't have
agenda and we
them.
didn't get to it.
So,
Well, I think that there's incentive built in, I think, to be efficient for, when some of this comes from staff presentations, but at a council level, if we want to get to that 30-minute open time, we have to
be prepared.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Be succinct.
All right.
Okay.
Staff, you have what you need?
Good.
Okay.
Yep, perfect. Thank you.
So that brings us to the closed session, and we're going to close the session. I don't know if I had to read a script, but I do want to say before everyone leaves, it's my last meeting. I've been to a lot of meetings. I'm really proud of the city, and I'm really proud of the opportunity that I've had to work with all of you. This is truly a professionally run organization that is committed to excellence, and I'm proud that I've had the opportunity to be part of it. And I feel like I'm leaving the city in a good spot, and I'm really proud of that. But this is not a me thing. This is a we thing. I couldn't have done it without all of you, and I just want you to know how grateful I am. So thank you.
Thank you.
New Year's Day.
All right. Well, I will. Do we vote on that then?
I'm going to take.
Okay. So then I will. I will
That's why
move that we go
that's why
into closed
nothing's
session for the
ready.
purposes of reviewing Mike's performance review with him. So I'll make that
And-
motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Councilmember Wilbur? Okay.
Oh, sorry.
Either one, that's fine.
Mayor, may I, the two statutory bases, you need to cite the specific authority to go into the closed session, and then the subject of the closed session, what you did say. So
Okay.
pursuant to,
Pursuant to Minnesota statute 13D.05 subdivision 3A. That is the Minnesota statute that allows us to go into closed session. We got a motion and a second, so we'll roll call it. So a motion by Mayor and a second by Councilmember Wilburn. And then not all in favor.
Wilburn, aye.
Rameli, aye.
Shack, aye.
Foster Bolton, aye. Oops.
No, you're good.
Deb Calvert, aye.
And Brad Wearsome, aye.
and then